7. The wooden staff, often referred to simply as a stick or pole, is one of the oldest and most versatile tools in human history. While it may seem primitive compared to more modern weapons, its simplicity and adaptability have made it an important tool in both combat and everyday life. The staff most likely originated as a natural extension of the human hand, providing greater reach and leverage. Early humans used sticks for defense against predators, hunting small game, and even to settle disputes within their communities. As societies evolved, the staff became a symbol of power and wisdom, often carried by elders, shamans, and leaders. In Asia, the staff, known as bo in Japan and gun in China, became a central weapon in martial arts. For example, the bo staff was a key tool in Okinawan Kobudo, a martial art that developed in response to the banning of weapons by occupying forces. A wooden staff is usually a straight, cylindrical piece of wood between 1.5 and 2.5 meters long, depending on its purpose. Its simplicity hides its effectiveness. A well-made staff could deliver powerful blows, block attacks, and even disarm opponents. The number of victims killed by the staff is in the tens of thousands of deaths in history. Its use in battles, skirmishes, and personal conflicts contributed to this count. The stick was a real lethal weapon because it could very easily shatter bones or penetrate the skull, causing fatalities. 6. Bone. The use of bones as weapons arose naturally when early humans discovered the usefulness of animal remains. After meat was consumed, bones were often the only part of the animal left, and their natural hardness made them ideal for creating tools and weapons. Sharpened bones such as ribs or thigh bones could be used as knives, while larger bones such as skulls or heavy limb bones were made into clubs. Bones were widely used in prehistoric societies for hunting and fighting. For example, sharpened bones were used as spear or arrowheads before the advent of metalworking. Some cultures also used bones as ritual weapons or symbols of power. In addition to their use as hand weapons, bones were also used as throwing projectiles. Hunters and warriors threw sharpened bones or used them as projectiles for slingshots. In times of resource scarcity, bones were sometimes used as weapons of last resort in conflicts. In ancient battles or skirmishes, warriors who did not have access to metal weapons could arm themselves with bones or spears with bone tips. The number of victims killed by bone weapons probably runs into the tens of thousands of deaths throughout human history. In some cases, bones were used as instruments of execution or torture. For example, sharpened bones could inflict fatal wounds, and heavy bones could be used to beat victims. 5. The club. The club is one of the most ancient and universally recognizable types of weapons in human history. There are generally two types of clubs. Simple wooden club, a straight, heavy piece of wood, often with a weighted end to increase the force of the strike. Spiked club, a wooden club reinforced with metal or bone spikes, designed to pierce armor or inflict more severe injuries. Clubs have been used by countless cultures throughout history, from prehistoric tribes to medieval armies. In ancient times, they served as primary weapons for hunting large animals such as mammoths and bison. A well-placed strike from a heavy club could stun or kill the prey, providing early humans with food and protecting them from attacks. In warfare, the club was a common weapon among infantry and peasant militias. For example, during the Middle Ages, European peasants often relied on clubs such as the mace or the morning star in uprisings and battles. These weapons were inexpensive to produce and required minimal training to use effectively. In the Americas, indigenous tribes used wooden clubs, often reinforced with stone or bone, for both hunting and warfare. During conflicts, the club proved especially effective against unarmored or lightly armored opponents. Its blunt force could cause severe injuries, including broken bones, internal damage, and concussions. This was particularly true during medieval warfare before the advent of muskets. Of course, facing a musket with a club was far from an ideal strategy. The club has caused countless deaths throughout human history. Its use in hunting, wars, and interpersonal conflicts has resulted in hundreds of thousands of casualties over the millennia. 4. Stone. Stones have been used as weapons in almost every culture and era. In prehistoric times, they were necessary for hunting and warfare. Early humans threw stones at animals to stun or kill them, or used sharp stones to cut prey. In ancient warfare, stones were used both as hand weapons and as projectiles for siege weapons. During sieges of cities, attackers hurled stones at walls and defenders with catapults or trebuchets. The defenders, in turn, hurled stones at the attackers from walls or bastions. The use of stones in siege warfare continued into the Middle Ages. Another interesting case, there was a war called the Second Punic War. There were used fighting elephants at the crossing of the Alps, from which threw stones at the enemies. As a result, died from 500,000 to 1 million people. How many died from the stones we do not know exactly, but the fact remains. In warfare, stones were a key weapon in many battles and sieges. For example, during the Roman conquest of Gaul, slingers armed with stones played a decisive role in skirmishes and sieges. The number of victims killed by stones throughout human history is impossible to calculate accurately, but it is undoubtedly enormous. Roughly more than 100,000 deaths have been counted from stones. 3. Spear. The origin of the spear dates back to the lower Paleolithic period, about 400,000 years ago, when early humans began sharpening sticks to create primitive weapons. The earliest spears were probably wooden staves with fire-hardened tips that were used for hunting and self-defense. There are several types of spears. 1. Throwing spears. 2. Stabbing spears. 3. Cavalry spears. Over time, people began to attach pointed stones, bones, or metal tips to the shafts, increasing the weapon's effectiveness. The spear also gave humans a tactical advantage in conflicts, as its length allowed them to strike their opponents before they could approach. In ancient times, the spear was the primary weapon for hunting big game such as mammoths, bison, and deer. In warfare, the spear became the backbone of ancient armies. The phalanx, used by the Greeks and Macedonians, consisted of tightly packed rows of soldiers armed with long spears. This formation was virtually invulnerable from the front and allowed armies to dominate the battlefield. The question of how many were harmed by the spear is difficult to answer, but historical sources indicate that spears caused a significant portion of casualties in ancient and medieval conflicts. Think about it. Spears were used in every conflict then. History tells us that there were 10,000 to 15,000 wars in the history of mankind. Well, if we think about it, we realize that there were a lot of casualties because history tells us that about 600 million people died in wars. 2. The bow. It may look like a simple stick with a string, but back in the day, it delivered devastating power. Advancing armies were often easily rained upon with arrows from fortress walls. The bow is one of the most powerful weapons in human history. Its invention marked a significant leap forward in projectile technology, allowing humans to strike targets at a distance with unprecedented accuracy and force. The exact origins of the bow are difficult to determine, but archaeological evidence suggests it was invented during the Upper Paleolithic period, around 10,000 BCE. The earliest bows were likely simple wooden arcs with bowstrings made from animal sinew or plant fibers. These early bows were primarily used for hunting, enabling people to take down game from a safe distance. For example, the English longbow played a decisive role in several battles during the Hundred Years' War, including the famous Battle of Agincourt 1415, where English archers devastated the French army. During the Mongol conquests of the 13th century, mounted archers were pivotal in the rapid expansion of the Mongol Empire, causing widespread destruction. They would charge forward, sweeping everything in their path, encircling territory and taking it over. How many people fell victim to the bow? It is hard to say with certainty, but it is known that before the advent of muskets, it was almost the only way to strike from a distance. Based on information from various sources, over 1 million people were killed by bows, but this number could easily be several times higher. 1. Water. While water is one of the most important elements for life, it has also been a powerful and destructive force throughout human history. The use of water as a weapon is not due to a specific invention or discovery, as it has always been a natural part of the environment. In ancient times, water was used to drown enemies, flood settlements, and cut off supplies. For example, diverting rivers to flood enemy territories or poisoning water sources were common tactics in early wars. For example, during the siege of Babylon in 539 BC, Persian King Cyrus the Great is said to have diverted the Euphrates River to lower the water level, allowing his troops to enter the city through the riverbed. In medieval Europe, water was used as a method of execution. Drowning was a common punishment for crimes such as witchcraft or treason. How many lives did the water take? Well, actually a lot, if all factors are taken into account. The figure can reach up to 1 to 6 billion victims for the whole time, as there were about 120 billion people living on the planet alone for the whole time.